Welcome to the Made in the Mist podcast, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Now please welcome your hosts, Emma and Dan.
Welcome everybody to another amazing episode of the Made in the Mist podcast. Today we have such an influential person joining us. If you don't know what the podcast is about, it's a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs where we celebrate and learn all the tips and tricks that make these Niagara entrepreneurs really succeed. Some of their secret sauce to success and what really makes them get to where they are today. Today we have such an influential person, such an amazing person. If you don't know who this person is, then you'll easily find out by doing a quick Google search. She is actually one of the top 100 influential entrepreneurs in North America, the same magazine as Jennifer Lopez, ladies and gentlemen. Please help me welcome Jenn Harper from Cheekbone Beauty. Jenn, welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No, we're so excited. Like I said, we've been wanting to get you on a long time. We're so happy that you've agreed to come on and share your story. And that's where we jump right into it. So can you let us know a little bit about, what Cheekbone Beauty is about and just a high level overview of your company?
Yeah, so I think the quick sentence is our mission and vision, which is helping every Indigenous person on the planet see and feel their value in the world while we craft sustainable, bold color cosmetics that are made for everyone. But after that statement, I think it's so important to understand that we truly live and breathe our why. And that was in the early days of me building this, it was just the simple concept or idea of representation. And I just go back to my own childhood. I never remember seeing myself in any sort of mainstream media or marketing or ads, in particular in the beauty space, but then in any. And I feel like as a brand, we're just doing such a good job at providing representation for Indigenous people. And then there, it was about this concept of giving back too. So I always like to share the story of within our community and the Indigenous culture, this concept or idea of success is never about what we're attaining for ourselves as individuals, but more so about what we can do for our community, which I think is really interesting because it's truly in opposition, I think, to our Western culture of me,
Absolutely.
and how can I build my wealth when within our communities is about this sort of equalizing.
Awesome. And a little bit about yourself. I know that you were kind of raised in the St. Catharines area, but what caused you to come up with this idea of starting your own makeup brand and your own cosmetic brand?
I think first off, I'm a little bit crazy.
I think we all are.
Truth be told, because who in their right mind would start down this path of entrepreneurship? It is literally, when you hear people talk about the roller coaster ride, it is that every single day. And so it's certainly not for the faint of heart, but I don't know. I growing up here with my mom, didn't grow up in any form of wealth. My mom was a single mother. But I just have such great memories of a good childhood. And my earliest memories were playing with her makeup and CoverGirl palette is always what comes to mind because it's obviously the drugstore products were what my mom could afford. And the smell was this medicinal scent that it's so nostalgic for me, but playing with the soft pressed powders. And I've always been a fan of beauty and spent most of my career, though, in the food industry. And then that was with Cisco, which is a broadline food distribution company, and then moved from Cisco into a seafood company in particular. So I was with them for 8 years prior to leaving just to do Cheekbone full time. But those spaces taught me so much. One, I was in a sales role. So you live and breathe rejection. I was
Yes.
told no, doors slammed on me. And it definitely builds that thick skin or that tenacity that we need as entrepreneurs because we hear no a lot. And then prior to heading into the sales side of the food world, I was in the hospitality industry. So we're in the Niagara region, known for tourism, and worked at a lot of boutique style hotels and really had the chance to work for some great operators that were really about providing just an exquisite customer experience. And I think that's translated into the kind of brand that we want to build. And then I entered the beauty space, and it's really a strange story. Like, I don't know if you've heard before, but it came, like, I had an actual dream, like middle of the night, pop out of bed. It's 2015. I am newly sober, which is a really important part of my story and something that I share openly and widely for anyone out there who might be struggling, because when you are struggling and you feel extremely hopeless, seeing people that have survived and then thrive outside of addiction is just such a powerful thing. And 10 years ago, I can't even imagine sharing that publicly. Wow. I was full of so much shame because of my sickness, but now I'm really open about it. So I get sober. I have this dream, and it's like 2 a.m. I pop out of bed, but all I remember from this dream is these native little girls with their brown skin and their rosiest little cheeks. And I grabbed my laptop, and it was so clear to me. Like, I'm still doing my seafood job. Yes. But this was crystal clear that my next step in life was to figure out, okay, how am I going to make a lip gloss? And what I wanted to do was start a foundation or a scholarship in something to honor my community, and in particular my grandparents. So I was newly sober, and then I'm just learning at this same point of my life. So it's a really crazy intersection where I found myself. I'm healing, but then I'm learning about the trauma that they experienced at the residential school system. And so both my grandparents were taken from the reservation at like 6 years old, forced to live in this system till they were 16. And now we know the horrific state and truth about what happened. And that caused what I've now learned is a term called generational or transgenerational trauma, when a person or a community is faced with something that they are not equipped to deal with. And so that played out and lived out, was passed on to my father, my aunties, my uncles, and then ultimately passed on to me and my siblings. And so that was my alcoholism, which was a Band-Aid, obviously, for so many deep-rooted things. And then in the early days, before launching Cheekbone Beauty, it was just a couple months before, my brother BJ committed suicide, which is one of the most tragically painful experiences of my entire life. But it was at that moment that I realized, aside from feeling grief and pain, but just realized and remembered conversations I had had with him, that how important building Cheekbone Beauty truly was. When I told him about the mission, the purpose, he was like, he worked with youth within our reservation in our community, and he said, Jen, our kids just need hope and they need help. So I'm learning all of this. And then after having that dream and learning about the hit and really all this new connection for me, like, was pretty new in my life. Like, I had spent most of my life truly ashamed of being an Ojibwe Anishinaabe woman because of the stereotypes that existed. And then as I got older and I got sick, it became more of an issue of shame and not wanting to sort of embrace my culture and my identity. But on this healing journey, I wanted to learn more, and learning more and understanding the past, understanding, as the years went on, my own issues, and then my brother's death, and that unfortunately suicide is such a common experience in many First people, in many First Nation communities, and it's because of this trauma. But what could I do? I didn't know much, and I thought, the very least, building this brand could be something. It could be this place where Indigenous kids felt seen, where Indigenous people felt seen. It could be this place that was extremely positive, and it was really how I began to rewrite my story, change the narrative. So not only for me, but it was in the hopes for so many families.
That's a remarkable story. For lack of better words, when you were at your bottom and doing everything to turn your life around and make a difference and make a social change, not just a difference in your life, but a difference in everybody else's life as well too. I know Emma has been dying to ask some questions, so a little fangirl here perhaps. So I'll let her take the next round of questions. But thank you for that high level overview. It was fantastic.
Well, even I just that night when you put everything into a business plan. Before that, of course, having a sales background, you understood like those pieces, but were there any other, resources or anything that you put into this initially? And you said today, it's very well spoken in all the marketing and everything and what's driven into it. Did you know all of this in the beginning, or it's been building and building?
Yeah. So after that dream, so this is 2015 and 2016. I'm like looking at your bookshelf here. I literally read like 100 books on business, entrepreneurship, and had no idea even what that word meant when I started this, right? And after that dream, certainly understand it now. And then on my Indigenous culture. So I just I became this like sponge, and I just wanted to learn anything and everything, as much as possible, to just try to figure out how to do this. And I think it's really fascinating, especially when you're reading other business people or founder stories. You really see that it's ultimately, it's this drive and this insatiable passion for the thing that you're working on that really pushes people forward. Absolutely. I grew up my whole entire life thinking I wasn't smart because I never did well in school. And now, you know, as an adult, realizing that this system of education is not set up for all of us. So that's for all those people out there that got C's and it was really hard, or a B was like so hard to get, that this entrepreneurship might be for you. And then absorbed myself like in like any and everything. Like I remember signing up for events all over Niagara. Like, where could I meet other people that were working on business? I literally went national right away, in the sense that because I'm Indigenous, there's all kinds of Indigenous women business networks. So I joined those and would show up at events. I would go to Toronto and show up at events, and I would just show up at anywhere and everywhere, despite the fact that I am very much a path, like I would literally say I'm, what is it, an omnivert, where I'm an extrovert when I have to be, but I really don't love it, and it's really, really hard. And so many of those events, I would be in a bathroom stall for like 20 minutes trying to work because I'm by myself.
Yes.
I have to go introduce myself to people for this to work. And that's probably the hardest part of doing that. But I can guarantee every single time I did, I would meet the one next person or someone that would connect me to the next thing. And so as much and as hard as networking is for so many of us, it does pay off. On our board to this day at Cheekbone Beauty, I did a speaking event and started speaking, which I hated speaking and publicly. Can you imagine when you're, and I would force myself to do it. And I did one of my first speaking events, and it was like 2018. And this woman comes up to me and she's like, "That was amazing. Your story is amazing. Would you like to meet the founders of Bite Beauty?" So Canadian beauty is not a big thing in our country. There's not a lot of big Canadian beauty brands, but I was a huge fan of Bite Beauty. And I said, absolutely, of course. So she connected me. And then I met and had lunch with Doug Langmuir, who was one of the co-founders. It was him and his ex-wife, Suzanne. And we met at like a Panera Bread in near Sherway Gardens. And it's been an incredible relationship, because can you imagine not knowing anything about this beauty industry that I'm in? And now I have a mentor and someone who sits on our board to this day that founded a beauty company that eventually sold it to Sephora. Yes. Like, that kind of experience or expertise is really rare to find. And so, I mean, that's me really trying to push people to get out there and network as hard as it is, or offer yourself up to speak at events.
So would you say that, especially in the early stage, that was how driven and passionate you were, and then putting yourself in the right places, coming from a different background in hospitality and food, you'd say that was the biggest takeaway and the advantage that you took advantage of? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Fantastic.
So perfect. I just want to pick up on another thing here. A lot of people have visions. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. We see a lot of entrepreneurs here, myself being an entrepreneur. And, a lot of people have this vision, this idea, I can do something great. But they often don't bring it to fruition because they don't have the passion, they don't have the motivation. So what are some of the things that kept you motivated? And I mean, you entered such a competitive market. It's such a competitive landscape. The beauty industry is huge. There's so much money being spent on marketing, on commercials and stuff like that, it's very costly. So, what made you want to jump into that, and how did you keep yourself motivated for that?
Yeah, I've said this before, that if I knew what I know now about the beauty space, I may not have started this business, because it is truly it is so competitive. Sometimes I think we're more of a marketing agency than actually a beauty product business, because I feel like that's where we spend so much of our dollars. And if I was just to give you like a quick number for each product, you have to add like 12, in some cases $18
Oh, wow.
in marketing for that to get. So digital marketing, that's the
customer
cost.
acquisition cost.
Yeah,
Wow.
to get one person to buy a product. So yeah, not inexpensive at all, extremely expensive, and in such a saturated place. I think my motivation is certainly this drive to represent Indigenous people. That has certainly been my motivating factor. I realize now I don't want to go back and ever work for anyone else.
Yeah,
Like
no,
if I
absolutely.
feel like, oh wow, this is, and not that I work less, because by no means I certainly work more, but I just think there is such freedom in designing and creating a culture at a company that, you know, especially in these early days in the startup phase, where you really have the ability to create the workplace that you want to work in. And just a great example is some of our team that's come to us and worked for us now, like things that I hear from them is, it's shocking. I had no idea, and then I remember, but how hard it is sometimes to work for certain people, and people have come to our organization that were working for other companies for like 20 years, and like then dealing with PTSD because they didn't realize how horribly they were being treated. And I was like, wow, like what an amazing thing to have to do as a leader is to create a company culture and then make it a safe place for people to work. We don't ever use the word family, because it's a red flag number one for me. If anyone ever calls their business a family, we use an analogy of like it's a team, because people come in and out of teams, right?
Yes.
And that's natural. You would never kick anyone out of your family. And unfortunately, when you're running a business, you do have to sometimes exit people out.
Yes, of course.
That's the reality of it, right? And so, but just creating a place where people feel safe, that they can be themselves, that they can express, you know, we all have lives outside of work. So I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of. And part of the passion of what keeps me energized is the ability to know that I'm in a position where I can help people make a decent living. Like we became B Corp certified in April, and it's another thing that I'm really proud of, is that living wage really matters to us. Like making sure people are making enough money to survive.
Yes.
And especially in a time of recession like this year, everyone at Cheekbone Beauty except for me got a 6% raise, right? Everyone, like on our team, and knowing that that's going to happen for us again in April when we do raises again. And then we don't just give out raises once a year. If people are, you know, working really hard and deserve it, it happens throughout the year as well. And so I just love the idea that that's what you can build when you're the one in control.
Absolutely.
And then your first product was the lip gloss, correct?
Yes.
And what made you think of the lip? I mean, in the beauty industry, you can go through so many different things. And this is just more of a curiosity question, but why lip gloss?
Well, for anyone listening, working something, Google Analytics is your friend. Like the top search items in the year that we launched, it was lip products, brows, and contouring. And those are the first 3 products we launched. We've used Google Analytics from the beginning. Data is your friend, and we make all of our decisions in business based on data. As I say that, but then I also will add, so you got to listen to your gut as well sometimes, right? And so some of the bigger decisions have been based on data and gut.
Yeah.
But I mean, using those tools, to avoid making mistakes. Right, because
but you're gonna make mistakes.
Oh, of course, right. But if you listen
I have a long list.
if you listen to the first episode with our Mary Jim Dio Daddy, the mistakes are just another way to learn.
Absolutely.
And as long as you don't repeat those mistakes, then you're doing good.
Yeah. And with trusting your gut, is that, can I bring up even now when you were on Dragon's Den and you turned down that offer, that it was $125,000 at 50%, I think was the counter.
Yeah.
What was your initial, what did you go in with? The initial ask?
My initial ask was $100,000 for 10%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
And Vince came back with you, for 50% at 125.
Yeah.
So even, why trust your gut of turn that down in the early stages, and maybe what other avenues did you explore for growth?
Yeah, so a little secret, I started courting, because that's literally what it is if you're talking to investors. It's like you're getting into a really serious relationship with someone. So I met Raven Capital, who is our investor to this day. In the end of like 2018, we started getting serious and talking more in 2019. And then the taping of Dragon's Den was in May of 2019, and the episode went live. The opening episode season premiere for season 14, so September 2019. So in between that, Raven did come back with a term sheet. So I had a term sheet from them in my back pocket, so to speak, while being able to turn down the Guzzo deal, because it was awful. Yeah. And their term sheet is something I had no idea. Like, you're new in business. Remember, I knew nothing about entrepreneurship, starting a business. And Raven said, what about convertible debt? So convertible debt is, it's basically seed money to say here, and it's like you're taking a loan, the interest rate was reasonable, but at the end of the day, it can convert into equity, which was part of, I always knew I would need money for this, and you're in CPG or consumer goods is just such a capital intensive place to be, especially as you scale. So I always knew we were going to need tons of money. And I knew these guys had the power. They're just finishing their second fund, which is at 100 million. So in meeting with them, I knew that they would always have money coming from their fund that was growing. And so we had that term sheet. And so go on Dragon's Den, and yeah, I was definitely able to walk away from that confidently, knowing that I had a different offer. But the reality is, like, when you just don't know and you're desperate as an entrepreneur, like, it's just so hard when you have no money, because all of this takes money, and you just want someone to believe in you, and you believe in it. And so I don't know what I would have done, to be honest, if they didn't have this offer for me. But giving up 50% of your business in that early stage is just such a mistake. And I would encourage anyone to never give up like more than 20%, especially as a startup. Like, that is such a big chunk, and you want to retain as much power as possible, especially in the early days, because as you grow and scale, you're going to be giving up more and more and more and more and more. And that would make your life very difficult at some point. So especially when you're in a relationship with the money people.
Yes. And when they do invest, oftentimes you hear that, they're not investing in the company, but they're investing in the founder. And do you think that was the case for you, where, you were so motivated, you really worked your tail off trying to grow your business from scratch, reading books, learning about business in general? Do you think that the investment was made more on you or on your product?
Definitely. They've said that for sure. One of the board member that sits on our team at Cheekbone right now from Raven is Steven, and he's literally said, they've invested in me, not necessarily the brand, but they believe in entrepreneurs, and that's where they really, I think, put all their cards, because it is about the person. And when I think about Cheekbone, it has just evolved from what it originally once was to what we are now. It's almost like we're not even the same brand, essentially. And that's really interesting, because, when they came on board, that's when we wanted to go down this road of sustainability. That's what I knew it would be extremely costly. And that's where Raven came in with their first round of dollars. And we needed money to build out the new line of products and work on this mission. And that wasn't the original idea of the brand. It was more about this idea of representation. We've never swayed from that, but then really thinking about how we make and create products became such a big part of who we are. And now, knowing what I know about the beauty space, really, if you're not innovative, what is the point of bringing a new product into the world if it's not something that's truly new, innovative, or different from what already exists?
Absolutely. And so initially, even because you started with the lip gloss and all of the things that Google Analytics were telling you, and when did innovation become the focus? Was that later or near and still in the beginning of the early stages, where you wanted to take it from being the cosmetic passionate brand to more sustainability based? When did that come in?
That was probably like happening in 2018. And so that was actually, I applied for Sephora's accelerator program. So Sephora offers an accelerator program for beauty founders. I met their team in Canada and then got rejected from it, but stayed in contact with their head of merchandising here in Canada. And I would just send her these ideas and then start sending her these lipsticks that we were making. Because from that conversation, they were so clear that a private white label brand would never hit their store shelves from an indie brand. You need to be coming into this industry with something so new and so innovative and refreshing and unique that doesn't already exist for them to even ever enter the idea of carrying it. And so then that's when I was like, okay, this is, it's my world in seafood was that last 8 years prior to starting Cheekbone. And so what a lot of people don't know is I was already in the sustainability world when it came to selling seafood. I would spend all of my time like trying to help operators and chefs really think about their sourcing practices, how they could tell better stories on their menus when it comes to sustainability, and would, be at like the Boston Seafood Show, and like I'm the one sitting in all of the seminars that were based on sustainability. So that was already a passion of mine. And then when I would think of how could I convert and translate that into the beauty space, that's when I just started diving deeply into this realm of sustainability and science, really, and thinking about how we make and create everything, looking to literally my Indigenous roots. So we have 3 pillars at Cheekbone Beauty. It's our Indigenous roots, it's our sustainability, and that we are bold, clean color. And when I think about the sustainability part, how that relates to being Indigenous is really intertwined. Indigenous people, we only make up 5% of the global population, but globally, Indigenous people and communities are protecting 80% of the world's biodiversity. And so if you were to think about that, that's like the Amazon rainforest, whatever's happening in New Zealand, aquaculture, fish farming in ocean, and how that is disruptive to ecosystems, and then, pipelines. And so if you think about just from a media and what you've seen, you're like, oh, wow, that is in fact true. And then I started to like talk to my family about it. And it's this really interesting way, we call it in Ojibwe or Anishinaabe. It's like our ways of knowing and being. And what that means is when you hear Indigenous people say things like all my relations, they're not kidding. Like there is a relationship between humans and animals and plants and water and air. And it's this like deep rooted cultural thing that I think is really hard for Westerners, for us to understand, that we don't look at things as commodities from the Indigenous perspective or worldview. And the more I dove into that, I saw, wow, this is really something that I would love to incorporate into the brand and how we make and create all our products. So we use a concept in our lab called two-eyed seeing. And that is this Indigenous teaching by an elder from the East Coast, Dr. Albert Marshall, where you're marrying Western science with Indigenous wisdom. So we use this in the process of now how we make and create everything. So a system called life cycle thinking or life cycle analysis was developed at the university in Portugal. And this is where, from the harvesting of raw ingredients to the end of the life of a product, which includes the packaging. I think for so long in the beauty space and many spaces, we're like, it's clean, but what about the packaging, right? Yeah. Like that seems to forgotten. So we were like, we do not want to make anything that's going to end up in a landfill. And how do we work backwards? And so then, intertwining the Indigenous concepts into that, it's like, if you look to nature, everything in nature and creation is made absolutely perfect. And I can imagine, my ancestors paying attention to that. Like when we think of just like fall right now, these leaves that are falling on the ground are actually providing rich nutrients for our soil, and yet we're raking them all up and putting them in bags and putting them in. I don't understand that, but anyway, that's what's happening at this moment. But those are things that I think as humans, like we've just screwed everything up When are we going to pay attention? And, not that our brand is here to solve these world's problems because they're just far too big, but I want to do something better, and I wanted to do something differently. And I feel like we have such an opportunity to do that. And so our job right now as a brand and as a community is to think of how we can just avoid adding things to the landfill.
Yeah, and being a Canadian-based cosmetic company, have you found that, have you gotten a lot of support from that, with everything going on right now with all, like you said, the pipelines and all of that? Has anyone come to you and looked to put you honestly in your brand forward of saying this is the solution for a zero waste innovation type of path for cosmetic brands? Or is that coming, do you think?
I feel we're in such a hard place right now because it's a challenge for people. Realistically, we have to look this from a socioeconomic point. Our lipstick is 32 Canadian dollars. That's not a simple transition. I think it's the best lipstick on the planet, personally.
Me too.
But
A lot of
so glad.
Yeah, there you go.
And we as a culture, as a society, have so much work to do into when I go online and I see my makeup haul from Sephora, you don't need a haul, you need one lipstick, and it can last you an entire year. Literally, that 30, that can last you. So I think it's about reframing all of our mindsets and how we approach all of our purchasing habits, where you're going to see, we don't get involved with Black Friday and Cyber Monday, but we're going to talk about for the next 4 weeks, conscious consumerism, and we're going to offer a sale because obviously consumers are expecting that. But ours is going to be over a 4-week period because I don't want you to think you have to go online and buy something just because you're going to save. And it's we're so conditioned by marketers, it's unreal, and we have a lot of unconditioning to do.
And a lot of people buy quantity over quality.
Yes.
And they're providing the quality, and bringing it back, to the Indigenous roots, and what you mentioned earlier that the Indigenous population only accounts for 5% of the world's population, but protects 80% of the biodiversity. And I think that resonates back with you guys being a small but powerful team, but being able to make a difference across the entire globe. And I think that is admirable and fantastic. And I think that more people need to think of that way. I think that capitalism, the way we've been living in the last 50 or 100 years, has really altered that. And I think we need to come back to what's best for everyone, what's best for the planet, what's best for sustainability, because if not, then who knows how much longer we're going to be living on this earth too. So like I said, fantastic story. I don't know if you had any more questions before I dive into the top 5.
No, I just one thing that I would like to point out, as we are an innovation hub in Niagara Falls, did you see any advantages like growing your business? You stayed in Niagara while you were scaling and growing. Were there any advantages, from the business perspective or just your personal life to balance those things? Were there any advantages to that?
Were there any other? Did you join other than the Sephora Accelerator? Where else did you receive your support, or was that non-existent?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm a big believer right now in that we don't control the timing of things, and things have just the timing for our brand to exist. And then with the pandemic, we were able to be in accelerators that were normally only open to certain people in certain cities. And so we were able to join a bunch of different accelerator programs that way, because everything was done remotely, which I think is really fascinating and has taught us a lot as a society, that we don't always all have to be together. But I think growing a business in Niagara was a great place to do this. I think we live in an affordable region still, and we're trying to keep it that way. And it's just made it easier for us to grow. I honestly believe that. I feel like I can't imagine paying a lease in Toronto, when I know what people have to pay, and why do I don't think we need to be in these big cities. I think with this idea of remote, it's just been so much easier. We're about to do a big hiring scale up again, and people don't necessarily have to be from Niagara to work here, right? We're in an industry where obviously we have science people on our team, and so Niagara, you are pulling from a work source that's maybe doesn't have the skill set that we need, but with remote work, we're able to make that possible. But there's also still, we're providing jobs for people that can do the jobs that we need to have done here in Niagara too. So it's like the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll put a little plug in here for Spark that Jen and her team, they host their meetings every once in a while here too. So how do you think, offering a place like Spark to the community, how do you think that's going to affect entrepreneurs and to benefit their outcomes?
Well, the resources that you've built here at Spark are really incredible. Like if I think back, if I would have loved to have this 6 years ago when you're starting out, but it's such an incredible place for people to meet, connect, and just the tools that you have to support someone. Dollars really count in those early days, and just having a place like this for people is amazing. So kudos to you guys for building this.
Thank you. And oftentimes when you're running a business that is becoming as successful as yours is, there's always that term, the exit strategy. And just out of curiosity, again, have you ever thought of what your exit strategy is? Is this something that you want to continue on through generations, or is this something that you're looking to work with a larger organization? How do you see the future of Cheekbone?
Well, we've always had huge aspirations to be a global beauty brand valued at $1 billion, wow. Which means we have to sell. To have that valuation, you generally have to do over 100 million a year in annual revenue. And so that's our goal. And in order to achieve that, if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't have the skill set for just me on the leadership team. So we're certainly going to have to hire people way smarter than me to get there. I love the saying, what got you one place will not get you to the next place. And so I had to think differently. And then when I think about the resources and how important resources are, to have capital, if I was to ever give up the company to a conglomerate that would be have more resources than we do, then I can. And because when you're building, you're constantly thinking about where you're getting the next bit of money. Absolutely. One day, if that didn't have to be my struggle, that would be amazing. And the whole purpose for Cheekbone Beauty is for Indigenous people to see themselves, and we need to be global in order to fulfill that mission. And to be on the shelves of retailers around the world, then we will need support to do that. So if it means me not owning the whole thing, mm-hmm. or even someone else owning more than me at one point, that's something that I've thought about and I'm ready for when we get there. We're a long way from there, because nobody's ever going to come in and buy a big chunk unless you've reached a certain amount of success. And so we know we definitely have to hit the double-digit million marks for anyone to even pay attention. And so we still have a lot of work to do.
But I think you're getting there. I know that recently, your product has been picked up by Sephora, and even more recently, I don't know if you shared the news with a lot of people, but the JCPenney acquisition of your product, that's huge across the states. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more about that relationship and how that's going.
Yeah, that's really new for us, but definitely will help us grow our audience in the United States. This is going to be in 600 doors across the entire country. And so what's really interesting, when I talked about data earlier, I'm just so excited to see who and where and why mm-hmm. certain regions or cities or states are going to love the brand more. I'm just so fascinated because, there's going to be so much to learn from this relationship, but we're part of a shop and shop that is a BIPOC marketplace that's going to be in all of these JCPenney stores through an organization called 13 Loon. And Nikeo Greco is another beauty founder. She's been in the beauty industry for 20 years. I don't want to say 20 plus because she might kill me. And she just had this idea, right? And I thought, amazing to bring all of these BIPOC founders together and put them in a place where everyone can find them and support brands that have just different offerings that's not the norm to the rest of the beauty space. And so we're really excited to be a part of this relationship. And for us as this little Niagara brand that started in a corner of my basement with $500 to this in 2023, we will be quadrupling our revenue over last year. So that's a massive growth year for us.
Well, we'll call a spade a spade. I think you're en route to becoming one of, or if not the first of Niagara's unicorn companies, and we're really excited about that because I think that the region has needed this for such a long time, and to have you as such an influential person, such a great story, such a leader is really what this region needs. So applaud you and thank you for making that change in our region.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And just before we go, we always like to end it off with your top 5 tips and tricks or suggestions for new entrepreneurs, things to avoid, things that you think went well. Just to, starting, it can be as broad as you want, it can be as specific as you want, but just top 5 things, or if you can't reach 5, just your list of what is going to make you be more successful as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So my number one advice is consistency. I always admit I don't have any great skills. I just woke up every single day for the last 6 years and have done something to push Cheekbone Beauty, the brand, forward. And that's consistency and that whole idea. If you don't give up, then it cannot fail, right? Like, so just keep pushing at it day by day. Number 2 is take care of your mental and physical health, and that you need to be working harder on yourself every day than you are actually on the business. So that's so important, because you're the one doing all the work, and in the early days as leaders, you're going to do so many things. So you need to be mentally, emotionally, and physically prepared to handle all that. And number 3 is don't say, there's a time period where you might feel like you're just overwhelmed and too busy, but say yes as often as you can to things, because the most unexpected, wonderful things happen from those times that I've said yes. And that why for the company is huge. So why does your company exist? And you need to be able to answer that with clarity. And now I'm thinking of a 5th one, and I'm like, just learning, right? Like, when I think about how much I've just tried to continue learning. I've always been a lifetime learner, even like on the road in my early sales days. I'm the one in the car listening to like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, like CDs. That's how old, like that's when I was like, they were still on CDs in my car, and just like trying to be better, the best. Like, I was at that time, I just wanted to be a better salesperson, right? And I think if we wake up every day just trying to think of how we can be better and do our part, and learning, like, just those soft skills are so important. Like, we live in such a digital, transactional world. Like, little things like compassion and kindness and empathy, like, those are huge, right? And I share my personal story so much now on like national, international levels, that it's that idea of empathy. Maybe someone sees an Indigenous person and they are struggling, and instead of going right to like the negative thoughts, think of someone that you've seen that's transformed their life, and maybe see that version of that person that doesn't yet exist. Because I'll tell you, I had a great friend, and it was a year after me being sober. She was like, this is the Jenn that I knew existed. And I was like, wow, imagine being that person for somebody.
Yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, just amazing. I can't even explain any other
Very
way.
unique.
Yeah,
Very rare.
It's so inspirational. And like I said, so heart touching too, that you think of these things, and you think of yourself as somebody that can not only make a change in your own life, but make a change in people's lives too. And I think that's what really separates you from the rest. So I really want to thank you for jumping on the podcast today. And we totally agree with your top 5 things, and taking care of the physical and mental health. That's something that we here at Spark really do.
You have a gym.
Exactly, we do have a gym. If anyone wants to join the gym, but we do offer a lot of mental health services too with some of our partners, and too a lot of coaching and mentoring, and just simple conversations, because as entrepreneurs you live a very siloed lifestyle, and people don't realize that oftentimes you struggle more than you show. So to have those outlets, to have people like you in the community who have done it, who, like I said, have seen the worst of the worst and made it to the best of the best. So like I said, you're such an inspiration, and we're going to follow you and through all your journey, and we just hope that you remember us along your journey before you come too big for us. But like I said, we really want to thank you, and want to thank all of our listeners for the podcast. We'll be joining our next podcast. We'll have another influential entrepreneur here from the Niagara region, so be on the lookout for that. Emma, where do we find these podcasts?
All these podcasts are on Apple Podcast and Spotify. You can search us under Made in the Mist or Spark Innovation Canada as our handle. And Jen, I want to give you the opportunity to, of course, cheekbonebeauty.com is the domain for Cheekbone. Are there any other channels or social media we can find you at?
At Cheekbone Beauty on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, if anyone's still using that. I'm just watching media lately. I don't pay attention to everything, but I'm like, Facebook, Cheekbone Beauty, all the handles are at Cheekbone Beauty.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And like I said, we look forward to listening to more about your continued successes.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.